There was a time when the India growth story was pulling up the world economy. The opposite now seems to be happening, at least for this year. The IMF has cut its global forecast, lowering the India growth forecast as well. Joining us to talk about the current situation and the road ahead is Geeta Gopinath, Chief Economist at the International Monetary Fund. Thank you very much, Geeta, for joining us. I want to start by understanding from you the extent to which you think and the IMF believes that the slowdown in India is currently lowering the overall global economic.
So we've projected growth at 2.9% for 2019 and 3.3% for 2020. That's 0.1 percentage point lower compared to October. And the vast majority of that comes from our downgrade for India, which was quite significant for both years.
So how much of the overall global economic growth forecast that's been lowered has been lowered on account of the India story slowing?
I mean, if you just do the simple calculation, it would be over 80%.
Wow, that's quite significant. I want to understand from you, what is your road ahead? Because in the report that you put out just now, you're saying that the India growth story will be at 4.8%, which is substantially lower than your original estimates. When we spoke last year, the IMF was far more bullish. What, according to you, led to such a significant revision?
So the first two quarters of fiscal year 2019-20 came in weaker than we had projected, which is why we had this substantial downgrade. I think the one sector where we are seeing the most stress is in the financial sector, the non-bank financial corporations. We've seen a sharp decline in credit growth and a weakness in business sentiment. And that has led to the revised numbers that we have for India now.
What's your outlook going forward? Do you believe the bottom has reached and from here we'll see a pickup, because no one quite seems to be certain about where the bottom really is?
So we have India recovering. So we have India at 4.8% for 2019, but then going up to 5.8% in 2020. So we have a significant recovery coming in the next fiscal year. There's a fair amount of monetary stimulus in the system. The corporate tax cuts are there. And there have been these programs for transfers to the rural sector. These should help with the recovery in growth.
What are you making of the policy measures the government has rolled out so far? There have been some reports, most notably from Arvind Subramaniam, which said that, while of course land and labor are important reforms, given the current situation, that's not necessarily what will provide the stimulus. In the way that you see it and the IMF sees it, what's the kind of stimulus that you think that the Indian policymaker should really be looking at?
I think the major issue to address is this weakness in credit growth that I mentioned. And so policies that can, resuscitate credit growth, but at the same time one has to make sure that you don't create another non-performing asset problem. I think that's the first step. So it could be quicker recapitalization of banks. I think that would be an important area. But there's also has to be important governance reforms. Again, like I said, you don't want down the road to be another whole set of issues with non-performing assets. So governance reforms are also important. And besides that, there is monetary stimulus in the system and the corporate tax cuts. I mean, these are forces that we project will help India go back up to 5.8%.
When the world looks at India, the current protests that we've seen around the Citizenship Amendment Act and the NRC, does that in any way impact how India is viewed by the world?
Rahul, I don't have anything specific on that particular issue at this point. I can flag more globally that there have been issues of social unrest in parts of the world. I mean, for instance, in Chile, and that affected Chile's growth rate quite significantly. Similarly in Hong Kong, and that affected Hong Kong's growth rates. I mean, social unrest has actually gone up quite a bit in 2019 in many parts of the world. And so it's important to keep in mind that has consequences for the countries in which this happens.